welcome back with North Star Unit 4, Animal Intelligence. That's what we're going to talk about in Unit 4. Today we're going to go to listening to, so if you can open your textbook, go to listening to What Motivates Animals. That is page 86. Let's go there together. 86. Awesome. First off, we start with our vocabulary. We read and listen to the passage below, discuss or think about the words and phrases in bold. You see a picture of a giant octopus? Let's listen.
Controversy surrounded the disappearance of some crabs at an aquarium in Oregon a few years ago. One morning, workers found crabs missing from their tank and empty crab shells on the floor. New crabs were brought in to replace the dead ones, but the same thing happened several more times. Who was guilty? They installed an overnight camera to find out. It turns out that a sneaky octopus had learned to take advantage of his nighttime privacy. Did he anticipate a midnight snack? It looks that way. He waited all day until workers went home. Then he was able to manipulate his body, lengthening and narrowing himself to fit into an air tube that led out of his covered tank. He moved across the floor into the crab tank. After enjoying a midnight crab meal, he went back to his own tank the way he had come, looking quite innocent in the morning. Workers were amazed that a seemingly unintelligent animal was able to carry out such a trick.
Exactly. Okay, so we have controversy, it turns out, take advantage of, anticipate, and manipulate. So what you're going to do right now is write the words and expressions. On the left with the definitions on the right. So controversy fits with A, B, C, D, or E. Pause your video. Go ahead. That brings us to the comprehension. Other scientists have added to our knowledge of large ape and bird intelligence. In this podcast interview, Liz Hennessy, a writer of Science magazine, discusses some new research on animal cognition. Here we have a picture of a scrub jay hiding food. Beautiful picture. Okay, you're going to listen to the interview and you're going to check the answers, whether the statements are a yes or not. The speakers say that apes and or birds can, yes or no. So before you do this, please annotate number 1 until 10 on the main points, the keywords before you listen. Do that first. Okay, that means you're ready to listen. Let's start.
A lot of the work is done in chimps and other apes because they're our closest relatives. And the idea is to put the chimps into a situation that they react to. And it turns out that competition for food is what motivates them to perform. So there's been a series of experiments. One of the more recent ones has to do with putting a chimp head to head with a human. And the chimp wants to reach for food and the human has the ability to pull the food away. And what the chimp readily figures out is that if it kind of sneaks around a barrier that the human can't see, it can get the food. What that experiment is showing is that the chimp understands that the human is watching them and understands how to manipulate the situation to get what it wants.
So I guess there's also been some interesting things done with birds as well, though, which aren't quite as close to us on the evolutionary relationship. We've had at least one study just this year that suggests that birds can remember, plan, or even, perhaps anticipate the future. Is that correct?
Right. What happened is about 10 years ago, a couple of researchers realized that some of the skills that you see in chimps, in social animals, including us, might also exist in social birds. And so they started a series of experiments. Most of them take advantage of what they call caching behavior, in which a scrub jay, for example, or crow will take a tidbit of food, a piece of nut or whatever, and bury it. And all the experiments are based on the idea of, okay, if some other bird is watching you bury the food, what do you do? And what they've discovered is that the bird is aware when somebody else is watching. The bird takes evasive action. It will go behind a barrier so that the onlooker can't see what it's doing. It will bury the food in one place and then come back and move it to another place.
And I guess part of it sort of plays into this whole question of what cognition really is. I mean, isn't that sort of an extra layer of controversy or disagreement on this whole question?
Oh, right. I mean, the definition of cognition and intelligence, even, if humans have to be the most intelligent beings, then we have to define intelligence in terms of what we can and cannot do. So one of the prevailing standards is something called theory of mind, and that is when you can assess what somebody else is thinking, can judge what somebody else might be doing, can take that information and use it at a later time. And at one point, no animal was supposed to have any of that. And of course, the experiments with the chimps and even with the birds are showing that, well, they know about deception. They know when someone can see something they're doing, and they know how to manipulate what that person can see.
Well, Liz, it sounds like there's a lot going on this front. Thanks for coming in today and chatting with us about some of it.
Well, thank you.
Okay, very well. That brings us to the question. Think about this, because we are going to discuss this in our next Zoom meeting. Yeah? In both reports, you heard research that investigates the meaning of intelligence, right? Now, in your opinion, what is a useful definition of intelligence? What do you think intelligence is? Now, I want you to think about that and write that down, so in our next Zoom meeting, we can discuss that. Awesome. That brings us to the listening skill, identifying the main idea and examples in oral paragraphs. What are oral paragraphs? That's when you're listening to an audio and you can just imagine the paragraphs. You can hear the introduction. You can hear the first body, the second body, the third body, the fourth body, and the conclusion. You can hear that scaffolding structure, that outline. Highly educated speakers often structure their speech so as to include a clear main idea, usually towards the beginning. The main idea, the central idea, is always mentioned in the introduction, which is sometimes supported with an example. Noticing when the oral paragraph has come to a close helps you notice when the speaker will introduce the next main idea. That means the subtopic. So you have the general main idea in the introduction, and then every body paragraph has its own sub-main idea. You can hear them introduce that. Let's listen.
A lot of the work is done in chimps and other apes because they're our closest relatives. So there's been a series of experiments. One of the more recent ones has to do with putting a chimp head to head with a human. And the chimp wants to reach for food, and the human has the ability to pull the food away.
Yeah. So Liz Spanisi says that research is being done on chimpanzees because of their similarity to humans. They are our closest relatives. She supports this main idea with an example of the experiments comparing chimps with humans. This evidence helps prove the main idea. So they use examples to support the idea that they are giving. It's always important to support the ideas given. That's why you have P, and peel. P, points that you make. E, explain it. E, give an example, which is evidence. And another point made. Explain it, give an example, and then another point made, explain it, give an example, and then link it back. Right. Okay, listen to another oral paragraph in which Liz Spanisi explains her research. Now, the main idea is identified for you in the outline. So this is the main idea. This is basically the sub-main idea. And you have to complete the information about the example. Listen and write it down.
About 10 years ago, a couple of researchers realized that some of the skills that you see in chimps, in social animals, including us, might also exist in social birds. And so they started a series of experiments. Most of them take advantage of what they call caching behavior, in which a scrub jay, for example, or crow will take a tidbit of food, a piece of nut or whatever, and bury it. And all the experiments are based on the idea of, okay, if some other bird is watching you bury the food, what do you do? And what they've discovered is that the bird is aware when somebody else is watching. The bird takes evasive action. It will go behind a barrier so that the onlooker can't see what it's doing. It will bury the food in one place and then come back and move it to another place.
Okay, take some time to answer this and to check. That brings us to connecting the listening. That's the last part of our lesson today. Step 1, organizing. Okay, we're connecting listening 1 with listening 2. How did the animals you heard about demonstrate their intelligence? You're going to complete the chart with information from listening 1, which is about animal intelligence, and listening 2, which is about animal motivation. And then looking at each animal, chimps, birds, and killer whales. What does reading 1 say about the intelligence and listening 1 say about the intelligence, and listening 2 say about what motivates that particular animal? Okay, please, if you want to re-listen to it, you can, but if you have a hard time, you can look at the audio, which is at the back of your book. Yeah, the audio script starts from page 250, and for unit 4, that would be 219. Go ahead. Okay, that brings us to the last part, which is synthesizing. Remember, when we synthesize, we connect multiple sources and components together and correlate it in order to create something new. In this case, you were supposed to, in a group of 3, discuss, each of you, an animal as an animal scientist in a specific area, selecting your category of specialization, let's say either chimpanzees or birds or killer whales, and then you would have to study the chart for your specialty, think about a topic sentence, and choose supporting details, and explain your recent research in a short oral presentation. So that is basically what you would have to practice, giving an oral presentation about this, either the birds or the chimps or the killer whales, and looking at the findings. Yeah, and that all based on what we have learned from listening 1 and listening 2. But we're not going to do that right now since we can't. But at least you need to know that when we synthesize, we take different points, components, correlate them together, and with that we create something new. Either we make an oral presentation, a discussion, a debate, a speech, whatever we can do, write about it. We can use multiple factors in order to create something new. That is what synthesizing is about. Wow, very good. Okay, that brings us to the end of our lesson today, and I'm going to review with you what we have done. So we started off with our vocabulary. Yeah, we started off with our vocabulary, and we connected the words with the definitions, the words expressions with the definitions. Then we went over comprehension. We had to listen for detail, to listen whether a statement was true or not, yes or no. And a question that I asked you, which we will discuss in our next Zoom meeting. And the listening skill was identifying the main idea of what is being said and hearing the examples that are also used in order to support that main idea. And that brought me to P and Peel. Point your opinion or the factor, explain it, give reasons, give an example, which is your evidence, and then link it back. That is always needed. Everything has to be explained and backed up with evidence and or examples. And then we connected listening 1 to listening 2, the information of the chimps, birds, and killer whales. Very good. You did a great job, and I will see you very soon. Thank you, and God bless you. Bye.